Hi, today we're meeting with Mr. J. Hi, how are you today, Mr. J?
I am dandy. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm so glad you came on today.
I am as well.
I invited Mr. J on because I wanted to talk about trauma and how it affects mental health. So can you tell me what exactly is trauma?
I'm going to give you the very, very basic definition of trauma.
Mhm.
Trauma is anything that overwhelms your coping mechanisms. And that's why trauma differs from person to person, because what might overwhelm you might not overwhelm me,
Mhm.
or vice versa. So it's basically anything that overwhelms your coping mechanisms.
Okay. Um, I wanted to ask you, say a child who suffers from a traumatic event, is it different than how an adult would react to a traumatic event? I know there are two. One is very young and inexperienced, and one is older, but I want to know the difference in how they would handle a trauma.
Absolutely. There's a couple different reasons why an adult handle trauma different from a child. And the biggest one is what I was just telling you. When we're a child, we don't have coping mechanisms because we're still developing
Mhm.
and our brain is still growing. And what happens is that when there's trauma, when we're younger, our development and our emotional maturity gets arrested. So oftentimes you might be dealing with a 40-year-old man or a 37-year-old female, but emotionally you're dealing with a 13-year-old. And what happens was when kids get traumatized, unless they get the help, which 9 times out of 10 they don't for various reasons, when a child gets traumatized, what happens is that they have to take on safety measures. So it's like we wear this battle gear. And then what happens is that as we grow and as we age and as we develop, if we don't work on that battle gear, what happens is that we start to morph into it. We grow into it. Then when we get to be an adult, we look out into the world and say, okay, this is who I am. And it's not who we are, it's who we've become because we had to grow into our safety costumes. So now, as an adult, trying to take those costumes off, it's hard because imagine you're wearing something right now that you wore when you're 10. It's going to be embedded into your skin. So going back and trying to take that off and undo it and deal with the marks it's leaving, dealing with trauma is a lot of work. So certainly, um, uh, when you are traumatized as a child, it greatly affects how you react and cope as an adult. And this is why we have a lot of adults now who deal with depression, addiction, um, unhealthy coping mechanisms, and the gambit.
What type of behaviors would a child have if they've gone through, while they're a child, how will they behave? What are the behaviors they would have to let you know that they've been traumatized?
Well, this is what's interesting. Every child, as you know, is different. It's just, before I went into this field, I was a certified special education teacher. And so, when you're working in special ed, every child has what's called an IEP. So they have an individualized educational plan or protocol. So
Mhm.
that's the same thing now with what I do. Every child is different. You can take two kids that are the same age and both of them can be traumatized. And one kid could go in his bedroom and be isolated and never talk. And the other kid could just, go wild and start partying and having a lot of sex and all kinds of. So it really depends from child to child. But usually there's extreme. You're extremely isolated or you're extremely wild or there's just it's usually on the other end of a spectrum if a child is traumatized.
Okay. When a person is an adult, what type of behaviors would they have? Would they
Well,
have trouble forming relationships with others?
yes, without question. Number one, we all, I don't care how healthy you are, we all come to the relationship table wanting our quote partner. help heal us. We all do that.
Mhm.
Now, you bring somebody that's extremely wounded from childhood, they got so much baggage, they put Santa Claus to shame. So now they're expecting their partner to help heal them, and they don't even know who they are because they haven't done any reflection. They haven't done any deep emotional surgery to heal any of their wounds. And so what happens is now you have somebody who's emotionally 10 or 11 trying to handle an adult relationship that has a lot of responsibilities and a lot of stress. And what happens is this is where you find adults in relationships that start having affairs, that maybe get into secret addictions. Maybe they're cutting themselves. I talk with a lot of cutters. Drinking, a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms. Excessive masturbation. I don't want to get, I don't know, want to get too technical on your podcast, but again, anything, because these coping mechanisms, whether they're healthy or unhealthy, are just to help us heal, or I'm sorry, help us cope with our trauma. And we do this by numbing, distracting, avoiding, um, uh, um, again, numbing is from drinking or cutting ourselves. Avoiding, which would be, I can't be emotionally vulnerable with you, but I can go hire a prostitute. Or like I said, excessive masturbation. I can't allow myself to be open to you. So let me escape and get into this escape mode. So there's all kinds of unhealthy adult relationships from childhood trauma. Absolutely.
And I wonder how many of them say, well, it's not me, it's the person I'm involved with now. Let me try
Oh,
somebody else. Let me find someone else, because that's probably would ease what's going on in me, you know?
so let me tell you something. A children that had trauma in their childhood, or even adults that have trauma and they don't heal themselves, they are a walking war zone. And as we know, in every war zone, you have casualties that are falling from the left to the right. And that's what happens is a lot of times we have trauma and we look behind us, and man, there's been injuries, people that have fallen back behind us because we go and we screw them up, and then we go on to somebody else, and then we screw them up, and then we go on to somebody else, leaving casualties of war all over the place.
And you think that most people don't see that it's a problem with themselves from what they experienced in the past and go get help. They just continue on searching for different ways to numb or
Distract
deal
or
with it.
avoid. Yeah, I think there's some people that do realize the common denominator may be them. However, they don't have the coping mechanisms or the willingness or the determination to actually fix it. So instead of fixing something, let's go and start a new relationship, because a new relationship gives us all the dopamine and the serotonin and the oxytocin, which makes us feel good, for a couple of months until reality hits.
Responsibility,
Yeah.
reality and responsibility hit. Okay. One of the things I wanted to ask you, say for instance, someone is married and I'm a woman, so I'm gonna say a husband, and the husband goes off and he has all these different affairs because of trauma and dealing with what he's dealing with. If that person decides to reconcile, is there any way that you can get past that? You could move past that and it'll be different in the future?
Oh, 100%. That's what I do all day. That's my job all day, is I work with couples that have been through betrayal trauma. That's my specialty, betrayal trauma.
Mhm.
Who now have decided to work on forgiveness, work on reconciliation, work on rebuilding, because it's three different things. Absolutely. However, both parties have to be willing to do the work, have to be willing to have a stick-to-itiveness. And as I say all the time, I can be your tour guide, I can be your captain, but you got to row your boat. If both of you aren't willing to row until your arms fall off, you're not going to be successful. If you are, you can absolutely have a 2.0 successful relationship and marriage in the future. But I say all the time, Yvonne, you might not get your happily ever after, but you can certainly get your happily even after.
Okay. What is the percentage of people that make it and have a successful marriage? Not the kind that say, not the ones that say, well, you know, he does make a big salary, he pays the mortgage, I don't have, it's hard to start over, I'll stay here, you know? I mean, how many actually reach an understanding of each other and what's
Yeah.
expected and what they need to do in order to be happy and successful in that
Yeah.
marriage or relationship?
So I'm just gonna rephrase what you asked just a tad and say how many couples are both willing to do the work, and that's
Mhm.
about 75%.
Okay. Okay. I guess after they go through that and they realize, nah, too much work. No, I'm really not that invested. I'm gonna go.
Yeah, and there's lots of variables. I mean, there could be the person who stepped out and betrayed their spouse.
Mhm.
Um, uh, they might not be willing, or they might be willing to give half, and that's not going to happen. The
Mhm.
person that was betrayed, maybe they had too much childhood trauma and they can't get over the betrayal, even though they want to. There's many variables. But usually, if both couples are willing, listen, I don't care what, and I can tell you stories, Yvonne. Lord knows I can tell you stories of some profound traumatic betrayals, but the couples are thriving because both of them understand and want to commit and want to move forward. The only thing that'll keep a couple apart is the couple themselves. Anything external couples can get over. And trust me when I tell you, I can tell you stories. So it's not what happens to a couple that keeps them apart, it's the couple's attitude. Do they want it or not? And their willingness.
Okay. If a child goes through abandonment, if they go through some type of neglect, how will that affect them as an adult?
Okay, so when a child is neglected or abandoned, they feel they don't deserve love. They feel that they're valueless. They feel that they are not a priority. And that is going to be their compass for the rest of their life until, of course, they get some help. And I pray they do. So basically, I don't care if you're married with 17 kids and you're talking to your spouse on the phone when they get home from work and they say, hey, I got to stop at the gas station. And you say, I'm starving and I've been with the kids all day. Can you grab me a hot dog from the gas station? And let's just say their spouse accidentally forgets because they had a rough day at work. When they come home, they didn't forget the hot dog because, you know, they had a lot on their mind. What that partner thinks is, oh, you don't love me. You didn't, so that's why you didn't buy me a hot dog. You didn't think of me. You didn't prioritize me. You don't, you know, A, B, and C. So it has nothing, everything comes back to, I'm not worthy of being a priority to you. That affects every area of life. I don't care if they're going into a school PTA meeting, they will get loud because somebody didn't agree with them. And it's not, and it has nothing to do with being agreed with. It's that you didn't see, you don't value me, you didn't validate me, you don't, it affects every ounce of your, listen, a child who goes through neglect and abandonment, it's like this. Throw a big rock in the middle of a pond, it's going to have ripple effects and there's not going to be an inch of water that's untouched.
You know, so maybe too, that's why sometimes it seems like the person will pick the same type of person over and over again. Like even if they in this relationship because of one reason, they seem like they'll pick the next, you know, the next one has the same type of problems over and over again.
Yeah, and you know, and not to get all Freudian, but a lot of times we are attracted to our parents, not sexually, but
I
we're
understand.
attracted to the
Mhm.
familiarity of the characteristics. And so, you know, I tell people all the time, familiarity doesn't mean safety. I mean, if you grew up with an abusive father, well, you can get into a relationship, and if your spouse abuses you physically, that might be familiar to you, but it doesn't necessarily mean healthy. But then you leave that spouse, and then you find another one, and that has the same characteristics because it's quote familiar to you, and familiarity gives us a false sense of security. So we got to be very careful. You know, listen, if we've had some pretty healthy parents, which I don't know how many of us have, but whatever, that's a whole nother story. If we've had some healthy examples, fine, great, and dandy. If not, we got to be very careful, mindful, and vigilant not to go looking for the same characteristics of our parents.
Do you think that, say for instance, people emit an energy, like you draw that type of person to you?
Without question.
I just wonder, I just wonder if, for instance, if you have someone that, say they're the type long suffering, they take a lot of things, you know, that they put up with a lot. It seems like maybe someone across the room will pick up on that vibe and head toward that person. So I just wonder if that holds true.
Without question. And unfortunately, the person that notices that are the ones that have those needs themselves. And so usually similar energy attracts similar energy. And this is why, Yvonne, this is why when a couple is trying to work at like a broken relationship, regardless of why it's broken, if one person is doing the work, they're going to start elevating like this. And then what happens is either this person has to do the work to come up, or what happens is this person has to start turning and go down, and then it's a unequal relationship, where this person's going to wind up getting resentment, this person's going to wind up, you know, feeling overwhelmed, whatever. So this is why it's very important that both people want to be willing to do the work. But absolutely, if somebody has insecurity, then somebody over here who has narcissistic tendencies or whatever the case is, it's like, ooh, you know, I call one of the things I coined is what I call the cheetah effect. A lot of times a cat will go after something, not necessarily because it's necessarily hungry. It loves the thrill of the catch. And so sometimes a lot of these people are in bars or clubs or what have you. It could be even churches. And like they have sonar. Who's the weakest of the link? Let me go to them. I need to get a fill and feel empowered with my, you know, whatever. And then they cause damage and toxicity, not with both parties, because, you know, so yeah, there's a lot of this, which is one of the things that I'm so big on, Yvonne. Boundaries, boundaries, and more boundaries. You have to understand your boundaries. You have to put boundaries in place. You have to give yourself boundaries. You have to enforce your boundaries. Boundaries are so important in adult relationships.
Boy, that was interesting what you said. I mean, all of it's interesting, but I really like what you just said. I can really see the validity of it, you know. We all have life experiences, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. How would you coach a person to move past the trauma? What exercises or methods would you have them follow in order to move past that?
So that's an extremely good question. But let me just say this. It's hard to answer because it's almost like you're going to a back doctor and saying, listen, my back hurts, I need surgery. Well, I'm going to have to do a whole workup. Why does it hurt? You know, what is the least invasive technique do we need to use? What have you tried already? What are your coping mechanisms? You know, like, so I will give an answer just to, you know, give you some things, but this is very important. That's number one. Number two, I'd have to see where on the spectrum is the person traumatized, because I get calls from people that just found lipstick in their glove compartment or phone numbers under their mattress, and they're literally hugging their toilet, vomiting while they're talking to me. And then I get calls from people that 35 years ago, 40 years ago, they had trauma and they just had a life event that brought some trauma up. So really, it depends on the spectrum of where they are, what are their coping mechanisms, have they done any healing work before, what has been successful, yada, yada, yada. You know, are they taking any SSRIs, any medication? I mean, there's really a gamut. But one of the things I just want to say is I encourage people to create what's called a needs assessment. What is a needs assessment? A needs assessment is when you have a specific need and your mind is hijacked, I need you to be able to have a list that you can go to. For example, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, you get into your car and you see some blonde hair on your husband's car seat. You know dang well you don't have blonde hair. And at first he was giving a coworker a ride home because her car broke down, but your intuition's like, oh no, oh, so no, absolutely not. And okay, then we go from there. Okay, what do you need? That's a needs assessment. You know what? Okay, I need right now to be able, who are three people you can call right now who won't ask any questions, they'll just pray with you. Who are three restaurants right now that you can pick up the phone and they'll deliver food in a half an hour, because you might be in the bed in the fetal position crying, but your kids still need to eat. What are three companies or three friends that will give you transportation if you need a ride to the hospital? You know, so what are your needs? And you want to do this when you're regulated, because a lot of times you have a need when you're dysregulated and your mind is hijacked and you're not thinking, and that's when we make decisions that get us in trouble. I say all the time, uh, do you know the comedian Monique is? Okay, Monique, and I saw her a couple of times live. She's awesome. But anyways, Monique one time was talking to a prison, this women's prison. These these women were all in orange jumpsuits, and she was giving her, you know, funny jokes, whatever. And in the middle of it, you know what she said? She said, "I just want to tell you something. I'm here on stage and I got my fancy glittery dress on, and you guys are all down here in your orange jumpsuits. But let me be very clear. I'm only one decision away from being your cellmate, and we all are. That's why I say we need a needs assessment, because sometimes when our mind is hijacked, we're like, I'm going to get in my car and run this MFer over. So we need a needs assessment. Let me go to my needs assessment. Oh, here's three movies that bring me some laughter. Here's three podcasts that bring me down to calm. So you have to do a needs assessment. The other thing too is write your younger self a letter. A lot of times we have uh, uh, stunted development because something happened in our childhood. Go back to that time and write your younger self a letter. Say, hey, little beautiful so and so, just want to let you know I see you, I hear you, I feel you, I know you're scared. I want to let you know I didn't have a voice for you then, but I got a voice for you now. You want to write your younger self a letter. Again, you want to work on your boundaries, but more important than having and working on your boundaries is enforcing your boundaries. So there's just a lot of things to do to help heal trauma. But again, it depends on somebody's coping mechanisms, where on the trauma spectrum are they? I even go into what hand do you write with, left or right-handed, because that makes a difference. I also, where on the totem pole are you, in your,
How does it make a difference?
Well, because listen, we live in a right-dominated society. And so people that are left-handed often feel as if they already live in a society. It's just same like with, you know, the gay population or any marginalized population. It's like, I already feel like I'm a fish out of water.
Okay.
So, you know, or where you are on the totem pole. Like, are you the youngest child in your family? Are you the oldest? Are you the middle child? Because that has some component. If you're the younger child, maybe you always felt dismissed. You know, if you're the middle child, maybe you always felt, you know, invisible. If you're the oldest child, maybe you always had so much responsibility. I'm tired of being responsible in life. So I mean, every detail of your humanness plays a role in the healing journey.
I know I have a sibling. When you were talking about the left hand and right hand, I know they were left-handed, but they were forced to write with their right hand. So as a result, she can write with both, but she favors that left hand. But just the fact that she wasn't allowed to just normally use her left hand, she was made to feel bad because of that. And it shouldn't have been that way. But I think now maybe it's a little bit more accepting, but you still, like you said, it's maybe we're right-handed over here, and that's where most, I guess, is more significant for you to write with your right hand or be right-handed.
I just want to say, when I was in school, like my daughter's left-handed, and so I just got her left-handed scissors. They're all over now. You can get them everywhere. When I was her age, first of all, I was dealing with the fact that I was a gay American. So I was dealing with the fact that I was already feeling like I was different because I was gay. Then I was left-handed. So when it was time to cut out patterns in class, and the teacher said, no, you're holding the scissor in the wrong hand. And I said, well, is there another scissor? She was like, no, these are the only. So there was no scissors. There was no options for me, whatever. So when I cut out my shapes, it looked like I was 2, even though I was 8.
Yeah.
So already you're living in a world where you feel different. Now add trauma onto that, and isolation and neglect and abuse and all this other stuff. No wonder why I spent years in therapy as an adult.
At least you went through it. You went
Oh
through
yeah.
it and came out the other side. So
And I
at
got
least you
lots of lessons for
recognize.
my lessons.
Yeah. That's how you can help other people. Sometimes when you go through things, you have an understanding that, because like sometimes I hear some people talk and they say the right words, but I always feel like it's something missing. And then you could have someone that may not even use as many words to convey what it is that they want to say or the meaning that they want you to get from what they're saying. But you sense that they've gone through it and you could relate to it. It's something about what they're saying, the way they're saying, the energy, what comes across. It touches you because you know they've walked through it. So maybe that's why you're successful. So,
Yeah, I
okay.
just want to say real quick, there's no substitute for experience. There's
Mhm.
no substitute for experience. I think if a woman has a miscarriage, let's just say, or abortion or whatever, anybody can sit there and shake their head and say, I understand and I'm sorry, and how did that feel and all that. But man, it's a whole different energy level when you're talking to another woman who had a miscarriage or another woman who had domestic violence. It's a whole different conversation. There's no substitute for experience.
Mhm. When you were saying about a woman who may find a blonde hair strand in the car when they don't have blonde hair. To me, when you said that, it made me think of triggers. Maybe that was a trigger. And maybe when other people behave in such a manner or react to something, it's because they came in contact with something that triggered them, brought them back to some other previous experience that they had.
Mhm.
Okay.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I see that you mentioned was forgiveness. Now, I look at my religious programs and everything on TV. It really helps me. And one of the things that they do talk about is forgiveness. Because forgiveness isn't for the other person, it's for you yourself. So you could go on and get over it and get your happiness back, your peace of mind, your joy. So how would you suggest that a person gets to the point that they can forgive a person that may have caused them trauma?
Okay. Good question, deep question. I'm going to try not to trail off into a long tangent. But if I may, Yvonne, just for a second, I want to go back to one quick thing. You said as far as triggers with that hair. And one of the things I want to tell you is adult trauma or adult betrayal, it wakes the sleeping giant within. What does that mean? Anytime we have developmental trauma or childhood trauma, and then we have adult trauma, we're dealing with the trauma of today about 40%, but we're dealing with the unhealed trauma of our childhood by about 60%. This is why there's no such thing as just working on the marital betrayal. You got to go deep into the childhood too and heal all that. What is that trauma connected to? You know what? I remember, like, for instance, as an example, I remember when my mother was in the car and she found hair and she screamed at the top of her lungs because she discovered my father was having an affair. All those sleeping giants awake within you that was dormant for many, many years.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, on to forgiveness.
Mhm.
One of the things I just want to say is this. Number one, you have to define what forgiveness means to you. We all throw around this term, love, forgiveness, but we all have different terms for it. We all have different definitions for it. What does forgiveness mean to you? You have to define it for you. That's number one. Number two, you have to apply it to yourself. Very difficult to give somebody what you don't have. Yvonne, if I ask you right now for $20 and you only have 10 in your purse, can you give me what I need? No, so you need to have $20 in your purse if you want to give me $20. So you got to apply forgiveness to you. Now, what does that mean? That means I forgive myself for all the lies that my mother told me that I was stupid. I forgive myself every time my father hit me and I believed that I didn't have any value. I forgive myself for when my teacher said I'd never amount to anything and I actually listened to her. I forgive so you have to forgive yourself. That's number 2. Number 3, I want you to change the word forgiveness to self-love, because you're right. Forgiveness isn't for the other person. It's a gift for yourself. So don't use the word forgiveness. Use the word self-love. The other thing I want to say is forgiveness is not a one and done. You have to forgive the fact, and then you have to forgive the impact. Okay. So I'm going to give you an example. If I come into your house right now and I steal $1,000 out of your dresser drawer, right? And then you say, Mr. J, I need that back. I need that back. And finally, you're not going to get it from me, right? You can say, you know what? I'm causing so much stress over this. Mr. J, I forgive you. I'm relieving you from that burden. You don't owe me that money anymore. I don't even want it back. I've forgiven that. So the slate is clean. You don't owe me money. You don't owe me. However, in 6 months, when you're getting thrown out of your house because you've been so behind in bills because I took that money, the impact now is going to make you think, oh, that SOB, all because of him 6 months ago. Now you have to forgive the impact. So forgiveness is not a one and done. We have to continually remind ourselves, no, I forgave them for that. I forgave that. I released them. I gave that, however you want to define forgiveness. I gave that burden to God. I'm not going to take it back from him, yada, yada. So just without taking up 4 hours of your time, that's the beginning of forgiveness. We all got some work to do.
Yes, a lot of work. Well, Mr. J, thank you for coming on. You gave a lot to think about. A lot of good information. But do you have a website?
Oh, yeah, I have a website. It's the easiest thing to remember, mrjrelationshipcoach.com. But I tell people all the time, if you never want to see me, hear from me, work with me, whatever, fine, great, and dandy, please just go to my website, again, mrjrelationshipcoach.com, because I have a lot of free resources there. So just go there just to take advantage of the free resources.
Okay. Thank you for joining me today. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.